Hey everybody. Hope you're all doing well today. Welcome to HackThis. We're so excited to have you guys here today. I'm Raghav Sani. I'm the Director of Experience for HackThis 2020. Shrestha, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Shrestha. I'm on Hack Illinois staff.
Yeah. So as we mentioned, this is HackThis 2020. This
Hey
is the first time
everybody.
we've done
Hope you're all doing
something
well
like
today.
a virtual hackathon. And so we're all super excited, obviously, to kind of get started. And this is a great first workshop to start with. So I think without further ado, we'll hand it over to Rem and Alice, our presenters, if you guys want to take it away from here.
All right, hello everyone. I'm Alice. I'm an incoming senior in computer science at University of Illinois. Right now, I'm in the Chicago suburbs.
And I'm Rem, that's like REM, like rapid eye movement. I'm a rising sophomore, although I look really old. I'm also majoring in computer science at the University of Illinois. So yeah, cool.
All right, so how's this gonna work? We're going to go over the basics of web development pretty briefly. We have a couple of slides. And then we're going to go into a live demo of React, and we're going to make a couple pages from scratch. I think all of you should have already downloaded or used the Create React app code to bootstrap your React app. So yeah, we'll start with the slides. Okay. I will just share my screen. Okay, so yes, this is our Intro to Web Dev workshop. Oops. Okay. Yeah, so overview. This is a very concise overview of the web dev basics. So HTML is basically describes the layout of a page. CSS is the styling. JavaScript is the functionality, and React is used for making reusable UI components. So HTML, like I said, describes the layout of a web page. You write elements in the form of tags, and there's always an opening and corresponding closing tag, which encapsulates each element. And tags can also be nested, so you can have like parent elements and child elements. And I'll go to this live short little demo after the next couple slides. And so CSS, this always goes along with HTML because you want to make your app look good and have some sort of styling. So this includes anything from like spacing, font size, color, animations, etc. And then JavaScript is what actually adds functionality and interactivity to a web page. And usually you write functions that are event handlers, and these trigger upon any sort of user action. So like a button click, like typing on the page, stuff like that. So yeah, I'm going to, going to go to this quick little demo. Yeah, so here is a basic web app layout. So you have your index.html file, which holds HTML, script.js holds the JavaScript, and then style.css holds the CSS. So yeah, right now there's nothing on the page, so we're going to change that. Okay. So within the body, we're going to add a tag called div. And this div tag, it's basically just a container. I guess it just like separates elements on the page and usually contains like other elements. Yeah, so we're going to do, yeah, we're gonna have a div, and we need a closing tag. And we're going to have a heading. So this is our title. We're going to name it Hello World. And a paragraph tag. So this is a demo. And we're going to have a button that says goodbye. Oh, no, it just says goodbye. Okay, so let's see what this looks like right now. Okay, it's loading. Okay, I'm just gonna refresh this. Hold on. Okay, let's try this again. All right, cool. So this is the H1 tag, which is the big font. This is the P tag, which is a smaller font. And then here is a button. So right now it doesn't really look nice and this button doesn't really do anything. So we're gonna change that. So first we wanna center the text on the page. So let's do that with CSS. So let's give this a class called centered. So this is how CSS knows which element to apply the style to. So yeah, let's do that right now. And this is the CSS file, and I'm just giving it a property text align. And let's see if that works. Cool, it's centered. Okay. And then maybe let's change up the font color a little bit. So let's do like orange, and then class equals blue. And then here I'm going to select orange class and text, actually it's just color orange, blue, and then, wow, ILL. Okay, so then, thank you. So then one last thing we want to do, we want this button to actually do something. So I don't know if you can guess what it's going to do, but we're going to write this in JavaScript. So we're going to define a function called goodbye world. It's kind of dark, but I didn't mean it to be dark. It's just what it's called. So we're going to use, so in JavaScript, there is this like document object where you can manipulate items in the HTML to display other things like when this function is called, basically. So we're gonna do the get element by ID. Actually, oh, I forgot something. So we're actually going to give this a class and an ID. So ID is like a more specific selector for the CSS to use. Like IDs are usually unique, whereas classes are applied to like multiple HTML elements. So let's give it an ID of, so I'm gonna select that element and I'm going to change what it says. So I'm accessing the HTML of the element and I'm going to make it say goodbye world. Okay, and then one last thing. So it doesn't know like where, we don't call the function anywhere in the HTML, so we have to change that. So we want it to call this function when I click on the button. So there's something called onClick. And then since I included the HTML file, or sorry, the JavaScript file using this script tag, it'll recognize the function that is inside. So I can just do goodbye and run that. So ta-da, it changed. Okay, yeah, that's our very brief HTML, CSS, JavaScript demo. So let's go back to the slides. Okay. And then one last thing, a brief overview of React. So React is an open source JavaScript library for building user interfaces, and it's actually maintained by Facebook. And components are the building blocks of the UI. So these are like, this is like the core aspect of React. It's centered around components and is written in JSX, which is a hybrid of HTML and JavaScript code. And there are these two things called state and props that we'll definitely touch on in our live demo. But basically state, just like you can use the state to control what you want to render on a page. And you can also pass in props which you use to communicate between different components on a page. So with that, I'm going to pass off to Rem to start the live demo of our React app.
All right, let's do the demo. And Alice, could I use your screen? Because my like computer literally is kind of frozen.
Okay, wait, hold on. This might be kind of laggy though.
All right.
Okay, no peeking. Or I guess we can just delete.
You can just delete everything.
Yeah, okay, pretend this was never here. Just... Okay. Start from here.
Yep, should be good.
Okay, I'm gonna like request control my screen.
All right, how do I do that? How do I take control of your screen?
I think, wait, let me, oh, I'm still screen sharing. Oh, that's why. Okay, okay. Here, you screen share. Oh,
Okay.
no, I'm supposed to screen share. Okay, sorry.
Sorry, my computer is doesn't like me.
Sad. Can I give it to someone? Oh, here we go. I'll give it to you.
Okay. Click to start the mouse. Do I have the mouse? Oh my goodness, magic. All right. All right, y'all, what's up? Okay. Can we delete these? Okay, let's delete this folder. Does that work? Okay, delete. All right. Is the lag okay, Alice?
I mean, I think it's fine for me. I don't know.
Yeah, it looks fine for me. Okay, we'll keep going.
Everyone else, hopefully.
All right. So, okay, so in React, the first thing you want to do, so you should have something that looks like this if you ran create React app with npx or npm. The first thing you want to do, as always, you ought to import React because React is a JavaScript library and you import it to use it. This kind of bracket syntax imports a specific component, no pun intended, from React. And in this case, we want to use component. So these are the building blocks that sort of compose an React app. So whenever you make a custom React component, these could be class or functions. I'm assuming most people are coming from a more object-oriented background. So we'll cover class components first, and Alice will show you later how to convert it to a functional component. But if basically, as you declare a class, you want to extend the component class. So React component provides some basic base functions like render. So that determines, how we draw the component to the page and other things. So we want to extend that. And okay, so I will show what it looks like. So render is the function we're looking at. And instead of HTML, what we write in React is called JSX. This allows us to fuse HTML syntax with JavaScript variables. You'll see what I mean later. So I can return a div. One thing to note, though, is that a JSX can only take one parent element. So you usually include everything inside a div. A div is just like a box that you put everything in. I can go something like H1. And today the demo we'll be coding is a sort of COVID data retriever. So the app will look like it will have a drop down to select countries from. And then based on the country you select, it will display the number of cases and number of deaths, number of people recovered in OS. Sorry, what did I say? In the country, yeah, okay. So let's COVID data, COVID-19 data by country. Yeah, cool. And I need to put a semicolon here. And if we just run this real quick, and save this.
Oh, wait. I think I can run it.
You can run it?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, actually, I think it's probably already running. Okay, let's see. Oh, oh wait. There's too much. Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, I thought you deleted it. You have to save this.
Sorry, what's the problem?
Okay, there we go. You didn't see what was there before.
Cool. And also, side note, my computer just decided to like me, so we can switch back to my screen.
Okay, sounds good. I'll stop sharing.
All right. Share screen. All right. All righty. Share screen. Share screen. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
All right. Perfect. All right. I will just recode that real quick. So this is a blank create React app, and open up app.js. Oh, it's like still very laggy for some reason. All right, so yeah, this is the default. We don't need this. We can delete all of this. We'll keep the so we'll keep that. All right, so what do we have? Class app extends react.component or component. All right. Okay, render with all right, H1. Oh, my computer is lagging. Okay, COVID-19. All right, sorry for the delay, should do it. And so to start a server, you could run npm start, and this should allow you to view your page on localhost port 3000. So while it starts, takes a while. I'll just explain sort of what's happening behind the scenes. So first of all, when you make a class in JavaScript, by default, it's contained within the file. So you have to add this export default line, or you could just add it here as well, export default class app. That will also work. Usually you could put it at the end as such. And what's happening is, what's actually being displayed is this index.html file in the public folder. And as you can see, it now has nothing. It has this div with the ID root in it. And what React does is it injects whatever you write into it. So as you could see, it's react dom.render. It's rendering app, which is what we're writing in. And it's injecting this into document.getElement by ID root. So this will just draw whatever we specify in app onto the index page. So this is, they have that all set up for us, which is great. Okay, should have the local server up now. Do we see anything? All right, perfect. So the text is a little off-centered right now. So what I'm going to do is, I think we already have this. All right, you don't need these. These come with default. We just need a .app text line setter. So what this means is there is a class named app. And for any elements with the class app, this sort of text styling will be applied to it. So we just need to go div class equals app. We save that. Oh, and by the way, when you make any changes and save, it's hot reloaded into onto the page directly. So that's really cool. Okay, now we have this. Looks nice. Now we want to actually get the country data. So what we will do is there is this kind of nice COVID-19 API. All right. COVID-19 API. And when you work on a lot of hackathon projects, you might run into a lot of APIs. You can fetch data from, the web. And a lot of these APIs will have documentation on something called Postman, which gives you, all the endpoints you need to look at, all the relevant endpoints. And if you go to different endpoints, you get different data, as you see on the right here. So yeah, so this is really helpful. What we want to do is we want to have a GET request from this countries. That will give us a list of countries that we need to display. All right. Whew. And usually you want to separate, different functionality into different components. So if you, program in Java, it's like making a separate class. So let's do that right now. Let's make a folder called components. Components. And React components are just JavaScript files. So I have a new file, and we'll call this, let's do country info first. So we'll do country info.js. So what this file is going to be is it's going to display info from a certain country. All right, so import React component from React and a class called country info extends component. All right, cool. Export default country info at the bottom here. All right, yeah, and as Alice alluded to, how you pass, things between different components is via something called props. So in a Java or like a C analogy would be, passing parameters into a constructor. So how this would look is, okay, so in JavaScript, specify constructor, use the constructor keyword and props. These are the arguments that come in. And let's just say, so the first thing you need to do is you need to have a super call to props. This will call the constructor of react.component and initialize that. So this is always a mandatory call you put at the beginning. And now we want to give this object a state. So what that is since this is country info, we want some sort of variable stored in this class that gives us, the data to this country. So whereas, in Java, you might have private variables, or in Python, it's those things you put in the constructor like self dot. In React, you do this dot state. So state is the state of this object, and you do curly braces, and you put whatever you want, the variables inside. So for us, we will have something called country data, and this is the endpoint I'm looking at here. So let's hope I could find it. Okay, so if you look here on the right, is my cursor visible on the screen, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so if you see here, a country data composes, so these curly brackets, this is, so this whole thing will be returned as a JSON, and these are the attributes inside. So we'll have something called confirmed deaths recovered. And we just want to store all of this inside a JavaScript object. And by default, it will be null. So we can just do something like country data null. And then we will fetch the data via the API now. Okay, so so just a demo of what props is real quick. Okay, let me specify a render. So the only mandatory function you need to specify in a React component is render. So this is very important, obviously, because you're drawing to a screen and you need to tell React how to draw it to the screen. So yeah, return div, and let me just have something real quick. This dot props dot hello. All right, so how you would work with this is you could create a country info inside. So import dot components. So dot slash means dot is the current directory you're in. Dot slash components moves into the components directory. And sorry, I got that backwards. It should be import country info in the name of the class from the location dot slash components, and country info is the name of the JavaScript file. And to draw a React component, it's super simple. You simply have a tag with the name of the component. So I want this component to draw something called hello. So right now you won't see anything. And that's because I'm not passing the props. So how you pass props is, if you're familiar with HTML, it's sort of like specifying an HTML attribute. So I go hello equals hello. So what this would do is it would pass the props hello, which is referenced here in this.props.hello, and then give it this value that we set equal here. So if I save again and draw, I should see, yep, hello. So this will be very useful when passing, different variables, parameters between different classes. So okay, let's delete this now. This is just the example. Okay. Okay, now we're going to call from the API. And how you do that is you do it in a function called component did mount. So this is a React hook that is called whenever the render function is first called upon this component. So basically, you can think of it as soon as this object is created, this component did mount, anything within that is also run. So this is where we want to fetch the API data. So let me define a variable called URL, and I will get the URL. What is the URL? Total/country. All right, this is something we're looking at. All right. Now we don't necessarily want to display the South Africa data. We want to be able to select it. We'll code the selection after this, but so basically we want the selection to be able to change sort of a state of a selected country, but we want it to be accessible to both the select and also this class. So what I will do is I will put a state within app called selected country, which by default will be null. So let's do just for demo purposes, let's do something called South Africa. All right, and I want to display info particular to South Africa. And as I can see in the API, here is where we pass in that country info. So how we would do that is via a prop. So what we just demoed, and how we would do that is something like country equals this dot state. Should be. So whenever you want to specify a JavaScript expression, instead of like a string literal, you enclose it in brackets. And this dot state refers to, so this is this object, the instance of the object, this dot state, and then we want to get dot selected country. This will pass it as a prop, and the prop's name is country into country info. And what we could do now is instead of having double quotes, we could do a forward tick. So this is, to be honest, I'm not too sure what this is called in JavaScript, but this allows us to put format JavaScript expressions inside a string, basically. And how you would do that is with a $sign and the JavaScript expression. So in this case, it would be this.props.country. Sorry, I can't see.
I think it's called string templates.
String templates. Thank you, Alice. Yeah, string templates. Perfect. So this .props.country, and this would be, whatever you pass here. This will be the same name. Okay, cool. So now you have the correct URL to fetch, the data for a certain country. Now we actually have to do it. And to fetch data, you use the fetch function, somewhat obviously. Okay, so you have something like const response equals fetch URL. And what this would do is it would fetch data, so fetch the JSON data from this URL. Now there's one small problem. This is probably the trickier part, is that fetch is an asynchronous function. So in JavaScript, there's a thing called asynchronous functions, which means they run asynchronously. So if I have something like, say, const data equals response.json, I might run into a problem where like this line is actually executed before the data comes in because fetch runs asynchronously. So what I want to do is specify this function as an async, which means allows us to do something called await in front of fetch. And what this would do is it would await the data to come in first before running the subsequent lines. So this will give us the correct behavior. And so whenever you run asynchronous functions, you want to be looking at this async await sort of structure. And if you search on Google, you will get a lot more info on this. Okay. Okay. And when we do await and the data comes in, we get something called a JavaScript promise. So how do you explain this? So a promise is sort of like, hey, this data is good. And if the data is good, then the promise is resolved. So we want to check if the promise is resolved. We do if response.ok. So this will mean, hey, response is cool. And we want to throw an error if it's not. So if not response.ok, then I go throw error, and response has a status text that I could display. So whenever I have an error, I could throw an error with the status text. So I could get more info on that. Okay, and if there's no problem in the response, then I call .json on the response, which will give me whatever I fetch in a JSON format. So this is really nice. So as you could see, as per the API, it actually gives me an array of objects. So in our case, to simplify it, we will just display the most recent COVID data. So the way this API works is the last element of this array is the most recent data. So what we would do is this .setState. And one important thing to note is that in the constructor, you want to do this .state equals, but anywhere else outside, you have to do a this.setState. So this is a React function that would just allow you to set the state. So make sure to call setState instead of just doing this.state equals. So this.setState, and then we will have country data. So this is the country data here. And then I want to get the last element of this data array. Remember, data is a array of objects. So I want data.length -1. This will give me the last element, and we should be good to go. Okay, let's display this info somehow. So, okay, and in render we must return something, which is how to display the element. In our case, if we have not fetched from the API yet, the country data will be null. So I'll do a check for that. If country data is null, so sorry, this.state, so you have to do this.state.country data. If not this.state.country data, which means if it's null, I'll return null, so I don't display anything. Else, I want to return, the data I get. So this could be something like, let's do an H3. Enclose it in brackets. This is a JavaScript expression. This.state.country data. And I just want to take a look at the API. Okay, let's display the country. So this is the country attribute. So I will get this from the API. The APIs you work with can be completely different structures, and yeah, so we'll work with it different ways. But in this case, it's country, and I just need to do .country. Okay, hopefully this works. Okay, it is giving me an error. South Africa component did mount. The await. Desktop processor country. Oh, sorry, this is the wrong endpoint. It shouldn't be day one. It should just be I got the wrong link, sorry. So I was not getting the correct info. Should be country. Okay, should be .total/country. Okay. This is right. Still giving me the error.
Do you have to save app.js? Did you change that?
Oh, did I not save it? Oh God, okay. Okay, thanks. Okay, remember to save your files, or else yeah, I'll save all the files. Anyways, okay, now we got the country name. If we take a look at the API, thanks, Alice, lifesaver. We could take a look at the other. Yeah, we could take a look at the other attributes. We could print like confirmed cases. This will be confirmed. So in our render, we could do P. So this is a paragraph tag. This.state.country data .confirmed. And okay. total cases. Should be able to see it now. Okay, perfect. Now, if you want to display, a lot of data from this country data, because country data is a object, which if you put in Python is pretty much like a dictionary sort of, or like a map in Java. It's really annoying to type out this .state.country data like many times. So what we could do is something called destructuring in JavaScript, where so the syntax works like this: const, I'll have curly brackets, country, confirmed. I'll also get the debts and recovered equals this .state.country data. And what this will allow me to do is this will allow me to simply type country here, which is really cool. This improves code readability by a lot too, so that's awesome. I can print out the rest. Debts, recovered. Alrighty, we should be able to see all the data for South Africa, I'm assuming. All right, perfect. So we've got the correct data from the API and we've successfully displayed it to our screen. Hooray.
Wait, Ram, we have some questions from the attendees.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah. So one of them is, what OS are you running?
I am running Windows with subsystem for Linux. Yeah.
Yeah, I am running a Mac OS for future reference. And then the second question is, what is JSON used for and what are endpoints?
Okay. Yeah, JSON is a really nice way of storing data, mostly because it's human readable, as you could see. And how do I explain this? JSON works. If you've ever written Python, it's like it pretty much is exactly like how you would write in Python. How else do I explain it? It's a good way to store data. So I can't explain it any other way.
So yeah, JSON, as Ram said, is like just a way of storing data. I think it stands for like JavaScript object notation or something. So if you see like the square bracket at the top, that indicates like the start of an array.
Mm-hmm.
And then each element in the array is an object. So an object just means like it has key value pairs. So like the properties are the keys, and then the values are like what comes after the colon. So yeah, think of it like a Python dictionary,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the same as that. And yeah, it's like really nice to look at because you can see like, yeah, like Rem said, you can see the properties and it's in plain text, right? Yeah, and it's a good way to store like associative data because you know what the properties are and like they're all the data is grouped within a single object.
Yeah. So yeah, as Alice said, if you see in JSON a square bracket, that's an array, and if you see a curly bracket, presents an object, and it's just a nice way of storing data. So country, Switzerland, this whole object is one sort of country, and I could get a lot of info on that. So that's really cool. The other question was, what is an endpoint? Okay. So endpoints are basically just the URLs that that an API provides to you, and like these are where your requests are sent basically. So as you can see, this is a GET request. What that means simply is you're trying to get some info from this endpoint. So yeah, so the endpoints are just the URLs, and different URLs have different data, returns different data, and yeah. So is that clear or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, cool. All right. Yeah. So now we got the country data. So let's see. Now we could also change this to. Oh, and by the way, the reason I'm specifying South Africa as South-Africa is because in the documentation here, the country must be the slug from countries or summary. Now I don't know what slug stands for. In fact, I will search it up right now. Okay, it's not that. It's not the snail. Okay, anyways, I don't know what slug stands for, but basically, you know, because when you specify a URL, you can't have spaces in it. So for example, United States of America, the slug for United States of America would be United States. Okay, so the slug will be like United dash states. So this is the argument that we feed into the endpoint, basically. So that's why I'm specifying as South-Africa as per the documentation. Okay.
Oh, I know what a slug is. I just looked it up.
Okay, what does it stand for?
It's basically, it's used to make a name that is not acceptable for various reasons, like containing special characters, too long, mixed case. Like it makes it appropriate for whatever usage. So it gets rid of like special characters and
Okay,
other,
yeah,
you know,
yeah. Make spaces into like underscores or like dashes. Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Cool. So if I change this to something like United States, okay, we should be able to see US data. All right. Okay. And now what we want to do is we want to allow people to choose different countries. So there's a handy endpoint here called countries, returns all the countries. So what I would do is I would literally loop through all of these and create a HTML select from these. So I'll show you what I mean. And to do this, I will make a new component called country select select.js and import the same things from React class country select extends component. All right.
I think you forgot the closing string or quote.
Oh, thank you. Cool. Yes. Okay, let's do the selection now. So once we get these country data, you know, this is a big list. We don't want to necessarily fetch it again. So what we'll do is we'll store this whole array as a state in our country select. And this way, we don't have to, you know, keep calling the API. We just need to call it once, and we have all the data we need. So again, we have the constructor, pass in the props, super props. So these are lines you will type in all your class components. And this dot state equals, and we want something called, let's call it countries. So there's an array that just has all the countries. And yeah, okay. Let me just look at this again. So we're also fetching from an API for country select. So I'll copy this code. Again, async component did mount. This hook is triggered whenever a render is first called on this component. Render, I'll just return null for now. And we'll get the correct data. So the endpoint is, let's take a look, /countries. All right. In this case, this will just give us all the countries. So specify this as a regular string. This will be the same. We get the data. And I want to set the countries array. So since countries is an array and the data is already coming in as an array, super cool, not super cool, super convenient. We just set this equals to data. Okay, this should be good. And okay, let's draw the return now. So return, and the HTML component that allows you to select from many different options is the select. So select, and how a select works is you give it options. So for example, option 1, option 2, option 3. So something like this. Okay, and I want to draw this onto our website. So what I would do is I just need to import the country select component from ./components/country select. The same syntax, country select. And by specifying this, whatever is specified in the render function of country select should be drawn to the screen. Alrighty, so we have something 1, 2, 3, and we could select. Very cool. But we don't want to type all those options manually. So yeah, typing all the countries manually would be very tiring. So in JXX, you can include a JavaScript expression, and a very useful expression is called map. I'll just type it out first, and then we could explain from there. Let me wrap this in a div. Select this .state .countries .map country option All right, so let's go through what this code does. So map is a very handy sort of functional programming concept. If I have a list called like 0, 1, 2, and I have a function called +1, which adds 1. And if I do map of an element in my list to that function, then I will increment all of them by 1. So what this does is, we could call this whatever you want. This represents a single element within an array. So in this case, this country variable actually represents one of these objects. So one of these objects. That would be what country represents here. And I say, for each country, I want to map it using this arrow syntax. I want to map it to an option with these specifications. So what this would do is it would create an option for all the countries we have in this countries array. And so this country.country, that is this, so the country name, that is what will be displayed to the user here. Value is the actual value that's going to be retrieved when we handle the event later. So I'll tell you what this means in a bit. This key is a React attribute, and basically allows React to distinguish between different components. And you want to provide it something that's unique. And all the countries have a unique slug. So I give it the country.slug as a key. And what this would do is allows React to very efficiently determine what to re-render and whatnot. And React is really good at this, in that if you haven't changed a part of your website, React doesn't re-render it. It only re-renders whatever you need, whatever is changed. So it has very good performance. All right, let's take a look at what this will look like now. All right, perfect. So I got all the countries in here. And yeah, really cool. But clicking this doesn't do anything to change the country I have on top. First of all, let me just move the select above the country. Okay, yeah, and selecting it doesn't change the country as of now, because I have not modified the state. So I need to be able to modify this select the country state somehow via this select. And select has an attribute called onChange. Okay, and within these brackets, we can specify a function that should be called whenever the select is changed. So this will be whenever the user changes the selection. And yeah, but there's one small problem in that the state is in the app component. So we can only access the selected country state via props in this component. So, but we cannot modify state in another component. So what we would have to do is we define a function called this. So let me do this in the in the app component. Find a function called change country. And I'll explain what this, funky syntax looks in a bit. This dot set state, selected country, e.target.value. And I'll explain what this means in a moment. All right, so we defined this function called change country that allows us to set the state, to some target value. And the way we call this function is we pass it in as props. So I go change country, or change country equals this dot change country. This will refer to this function right here. And this will allow me to specify this dot props dot change country here. All right, so what this would do is whenever the user changes a select here, it will call this function, this dot props dot change country, which is, since it's a props, the change country, the function is defined here, and then it will set the state to e.target.value. So basically what happens is whenever there's a change, this is an event, and in order to achieve this value, which is the slug, we do e.target.value. So okay, it should okay, I forgot one thing. I forgot one thing. So this is sort of a funky syntax. It's called an arrow function in JavaScript. And whenever you have a function, so notice that this function, this dot props dot change country, is not called immediately. It's only called whenever whenever the select is changed. So whenever you have this type of function where it's not called immediately, like this is a function that's called immediately. Whenever you have these type of functions that are not called immediately, you want to specify them as arrow functions. And the reason for this is because this refers to different contexts in this case. This usually refers to the object which you call the function from. But notice that we want this dot set state, we want the state of the app. So if we just specify as a normal function like this, this will be no good, because this will actually refer to the country select component, because that's where we're calling the function from. So in order to subvert this kind of problem, we change this into an arrow syntax. And what this does is it changes the meaning of this to be lexically binded. And what that means is this will take will refer to what the immediate scope around this function, which corresponds to the app. So this will give us the correct behavior. So make sure, when you have a function that's called immediately, specify it as an arrow. Okay. One small other problem we have is, notice that country info, we only fetch this data on component did mount. So this will not give us the behavior we want, because this is only be called once, and this will be called on the initial value of country. So although the state is being updated, we don't see the changes here on this page, simply because we're not fetching new data from the API. So there is another hook called component did update. And we basically want to execute the exact same code as in component did mount. So what I would do, I'm just going to pull this code into a separate function called fetch data. Fetch data. All right, this is good, and call fetch data. So this dot fetch data. And this hook component did update is invoked whenever props are updated. So in this case, the props passed down is the selected country. So whenever the selected country is changed, and the props is changed, this will be invoked. And we want to make sure it's not the same as the previous country. So we do if, and this takes a argument, which is the previous props before the update. Okay, so if prev props dot country not equals this dot props dot country, then we will fetch data. So this should give us the correct behavior if I have everything coded correctly. Okay, I don't. Give me a moment. So first of all, let me just add a default option here. Option, select a country. So this will be what's oh, I know what's the problem here. Okay. So anyways, for this option, you could specify select a country. So when the user is first visiting the page, they'll see the select a country. So this will be easy to understand. And the problem is I'm not changing the select a country. Right, actually, on second thought, I am not too sure. So let's set this to null, so which means the user has not selected a country yet. And then we will do for the country info. Notice that this country prop being passed, this dot state dot select a country starts out as a null, simply because we want to just display select a option, select a country when the user first enters the page. We'll do an extra check here in country info in the component amount of country info, because otherwise this will be a null and this will throw us an error. So what we would do is if this dot props dot country. So this will make sure it's not null. Alice, is everything okay so far? I'm not sure if I'm like jumping around. I'm probably not doing a really good job at like staying coherent. Are there any questions or concerns?
Oh, yeah, we have a couple of questions. I guess we can address them now.
All right, yes.
Yeah, so someone
All right,
wants,
yeah.
could you explain what await does a bit more?
Await?
Yeah, like async await.
Async await. So await basically pauses execution on this function until I get a response from fetch. Because fetch is asynchronous, which means it does not necessarily run exactly where you put it in the code. However, in order to get the response.json, I obviously need to have the response first. So I put an await here, which will basically delay execution there until I have the response. The response is okay, then I will fetch the data. Does that make sense? Sorry, I'll set the data.
And then another question was, why do we need value when we already have key as a parameter in the option tag?
Oh, yeah. So value is a standard. It's the actual like HTML attribute. So if you write this in plain HTML, you wouldn't have this key. This key is just because React gives you a warning. So this code is going to work without the key. So actually, the value is what matters here. This is the value returned by the event. The key is so it gives React a unique identifier to this particular option so that it does not re-render unnecessarily, I guess. And when you do a map through an array, you should provide a key to your components. Yeah.
All right. Cool, thank you.
All right, so I'm still wondering why this does. Okay, I know why this doesn't work. So I forgot to pass the props. This is something I forget a lot. And this might be because I don't use React too much, but I forget this a lot. So in country select, let's take a look at which props we use. Aha, we do this.props.change country. And if I don't pass, the props, which is this function, into the component, then effectively, I can't call the function. So what I would do now is, so in country info, I called it, in country select, I called it change country. All right, so we'll call the attribute change country props equals this dot state dot change country, lowercase. So this should give us the desired behavior now, in that we pass the props change country, which is the function. Oh, not state, sorry. This dot change country, which refer to this function, not a state. So we pass the props change country, which is the function change country defined here. And whenever we have a on change, we will invoke this function. So this should give us the desired behavior now. Let me just reload this real quick. All right, fingers crossed. Let's take a look at Pakistan. No? Germany? All right, no. This am I missing anything?
This is an important part of web dev too, debugging.
That is correct. So whenever I do web dev, and especially web dev, actually, whenever I do web dev, there is always bugs. And JavaScript kind of does a terrible job at this because JavaScript allows you to like code pretty freely. It doesn't enforce syntax very like stringently. So a lot of times you run into bugs. All right. Does anyone in the chat see the bug? Change country. So countries. Oh my goodness. Sorry. Did I? Oh my goodness. Sorry. This component did update should be in the country info. I'm sorry, because the props passed to country select does not change. So the only props I'm looking at is this change country function. And I guess also this country, but oh sorry, this how should I explain this? Yeah, this does not matter. Sorry, this is incorrect. It should just be async component did mount. And I guess this makes sense. We don't need the component did update because if you think of it this way, this select is never updated. This is always the same. The only thing that's updated is the actual data that's displayed below. So sorry about that. I confused myself. So you only need the component async component did mount in the country select. And this is the code you should be looking at. The part where you need the component did update is in the country info because we need to display different country data based on the updated props that are passed in. So I'll pull this function. So exactly what I did, I just completely confused myself. Async fetch country data. All right, and component did mount, we'll call this function fetch country data. So we don't use async here. Component did update if prev props dot country not equals this dot props dot country. We'll call fetch country. All right, pass in prev props. So again, these are the props before the update. And we'll compare before and after. And only if it changes, we will fetch new country data. All right, should give us the behavior now. All right, hooray. So as you see now, if we select different things in the different countries in the dropdown, then we get updated info on the bottom. So I'm sorry if I was very confusing. I confused myself there. But is everyone okay?
All right, I think we can pass over to me now.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Cool, thank you for that. That was awesome. And now I'm gonna rewrite all of this code. No, not really, but a little bit. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, so I basically have the exact same code that he just wrote. Let me move this. Okay, so like Rem said before the demo, so there's two types, React has two types of components. So there's a class component and there's a functional component. So if you guys ran the create React app code, you'll see that it defaults to a functional React component. And those are, so that's newer than the class component, but it does the exact same thing. Like, I guess there's like a few nuances, but the functionality is basically the same. And for me, I never found any reason to use one over the other. I guess it's just personal preference, but functional components do tend to be cleaner and, in my opinion, a little bit easier to understand. So I'll show you how to convert a class component into a functional component. So I'm just going to change one of the components. So I'll just do the country select. Okay, so we don't need any components because we're not dealing with classes or state or constructors or anything. So yeah, just throw away everything you've known about object-oriented because we're not using that here. So we're just going to make the entire component a function. So I'm going to keep this name. And we don't need to extend from the component class. And then we need that, yeah. And then I'm just going to, I think, yeah, it exports. So yeah, that's the first step. And then, so like I said before, we're not relying on any type of or explicit state. We're handling state implicitly through the use of functions and variables. So I'm gonna get rid of this. And instead, we're going to use a React hook called useState. So yeah, with functional components they have their own custom React hooks. One of them is called useState, and it basically does the same thing as like the explicit state object in a class component. I'll just show you what it looks like right now. So I'm going to declare, so I'm using the same variable name, countries, and then I'm going to declare a function called setCountries equals useState empty array. So yeah, this looks kind of weird at first, but I'll just break it down a little bit. So the useState, it basically, so it you define this like 2-element array. So the first element of the array is the state variable. So this will hold like what the countries are. And then setCountries is the function that changes this state variable. So instead of doing something like this dot set state, or I guess it's right here. Yeah, instead of doing this, and this takes in, you need to define explicitly like what state variable you're trying to change. You can just use this setter, which is defined for each state variable that you're keeping track of. And then the useState hook, basically, so like it takes in the default value, which is an empty array. And then this handles all the functionality. Like you don't need to explicitly define setCountries. It'll just, you can call it and it works. Pretty magical. So yeah, we also don't need a component did mount because this is a class component thing. So we're just going to rename this. Actually, I'm going to restructure it a little bit. So we're going to name this const get countries. And then I'm going to make it an arrow function, but you can make it a regular function too. It doesn't really matter for functional React components. Yeah, so this wraps our API call still. And then I'm going to use another React hook, functional React hook called useEffect. So I'm just going to write it first. So it takes in, yeah, I'll just write it first and I'll explain it. Get countries, and then empty array. Okay, so yeah, this syntax looks kind of weird too. Oh wait, oops, I forgot this is supposed to be async. Okay. Yeah, basically the useEffect hook, it gets triggered every time. So if you see this empty array here, this is called a dependency array. And yeah, it can hold like state variables or like state setters. And basically whenever something in the dependency array changes, then whatever is in the useEffect gets called. So it's basically like, if you look in the country info component, it's basically like component did mount and component did update in one function, or it can be, I guess, because if you don't specify anything in the dependency array, then this function will just get called when the page loads or every time the page is reloaded. Yeah, so, and then we also don't need this render function because we're just returning directly the JSX code. So get rid of that. And oh yeah, I have an auto formatter. If that confused anyone, it just made it align nicer.
It confused me. Oh my goodness, magic.
Oh wait, why is it? Oh wait, I'm gonna change that later. Okay, so yeah, we also don't need, so we can't use this set state anymore because we're not keeping track of this, like whatever this is. So we're just gonna replace that with what we defined up here, set countries, and then just pass in the data. So yeah, that's pretty easy. And then whenever we're accessing like this.state.countries, we can just use countries instead. So, oh yeah, this will need to take props. Yeah, so yeah, you just, oh, actually I'll go over this real quick. So I think Rem talked about this a little bit before, but you can use like JavaScript destructuring notation. So you pass in props like as a parameter in the component function. And then if we're accessing like this.props.change country, we can just, so we don't need this anymore. So we can either do props.change country, or we can just do directly destructure it in here. So if I put another squiggly boys, change country, and I can just use change country here. And yeah, hopefully it works. Yeah, so then, like I said before, we can't use this.state anymore because we're not keeping track of state explicitly. So we can just do countries.map. And I think that's it. Yeah, let's try that. So, okay, let me just reload this. Let's do Cuba. Okay.
Amazing.
Same
Works
thing.
on first try. Works on first try. Oh,
Yeah, I was expecting that.
goals.
So yeah, you can see it doesn't look any different, but I guess that's the point because functional components do the same thing that class components do. It's just like the way you write things. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, okay, yeah, that was faster than I thought. We can move on to styling it up a little bit because it's always nice to make things pretty. So yeah, first I will go over a component library called react-bootstrap. So yeah, React has a few really nice component libraries, which component libraries are basically like if you ever use Bootstrap with like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, it has like predefined elements that you can just like put into your code, and it's like pre-styled, and like some like base functionality is already there, so you don't have to write everything from scratch because that's kind of a pain. So yeah, React Bootstrap is basically just Bootstrap for React. There's also things like there's like semantic UI React, which is another component library. Yeah, you can see like all these custom components that they have already defined for you. And there's also like material UI, which is I think Google's styling component stuff. Yeah, it also has dark theme. Okay, anyways. I just said Google and then my phone thought I was talking to it. So, okay. So I'm going to be using React Bootstrap. Where'd it go? Here. Yeah. Actually, I'm going to go to table first. Yeah. So it's like another library that you need to install, like in your, when you do like npm install, you need to include like a couple of dependencies. So we already have that installed. I'm not going to go over that, but you can look at that in like the getting started.
They don't have it installed, I think.
Oh, really?
So you just need to run npm inst. Let me post this on the YouTube real quick.
Oh, okay, yeah. npm install react-bootstrap and bootstrap.
Yeah, okay. So,
and then, yeah, so once you run this command, then you need to import the CSS file in your index.js or app.js file. I usually do it in the index.js because then this applies to every page. So all the components will look like they should. Okay. Wait, Rem, did you put it in the?
Yes, I have. Yes.
Okay, so now I can actually use it. I'm gonna go back to table. So yeah, this is a nice looking table. And it would be pretty hard to code this from scratch using HTML. So I'm going to use their table. And I'm going to use it in the country info component to display these attributes in a table so that it looks a little bit nicer, it's a little easier to read. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import the table component from React Bootstrap. And then I'm just going to plop it in here. Oops. Yeah, if you use lowercase table, that's just a plain HTML table. It's going to look kind of ugly. But if you use a capital T, that's the React Bootstrap one. So that's the one you want to use. And then we also want it to have these nice like striped, like the gray and white bordered hover so that it like hovers on which line you select. So yeah, we're just going to copy that over. And these are basically props for the component that they defined. So that's how it knows to render it like this. Okay, so the rest of the table component, or it encapsulates like a regular HTML table. That's why these are like lowercase tags. So this is going to be the first row of our table. So we want to do, oh wait, I forgot this last time. Okay, we want to put in a row and then th tag. So let's do country. Or I guess confirmed cases to be more clear.
So one question, Alice, what browser are you using?
Oh, I get a lot of questions about that. I'm not using Google Chrome, if you notice. I'm using Opera, which is it's built on Chromium, but basically has like, this nice sidebar. You can just like pop out like Messenger without leaving the page. You can pop out. Yeah, it's pretty nice. And I guess it doesn't like destroy my computer either. So yeah, any other questions?
That's it. You're doing a super job. No one has questions.
Oh, cool. Thanks. That's what I like to hear. Okay. So yeah, that's our first row. And then we want to do the rest of the table, which actually has the values. So T body, and then make another row. And then TD is the name of the row columns, I guess. And then, so this time we're going to use the squiggly boys again because we're using the JavaScript, like the actual JavaScript variable that Rem defined up above. So this will hold the actual like values. Yeah. Confirm. Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay, so there's our React Bootstrap table. And if I save, and then I look, not that way, this way. Ta-da! That looks pretty nice to me. But okay, we still have like some, minor styling issues. Like the table probably shouldn't take up like the whole width of the page, and like these are kind of smushed together. So we can fix some of that too. Also, this dropdown could look a little bit nicer. And React Bootstrap conveniently has a dropdown right here, dropdown component, which looks like this. So yeah, we're gonna borrow that too. So that'll be the country select component. So I need to import dropdown first. Okay. Oh, Oh, actually, I made this functional. Oh.
Do we maybe want to do the other stuff first, like the spacing? I think more people would be interested in that.
Okay, sure. We'll keep that for future reference. So yeah, let's open up, oh yeah, app.css. So yeah, it's looking pretty blank right now. So let's say, okay, wait, display this again. Yeah, let's try to put some more spacing between each of these elements and also like shrink the table down to a narrower width. That's where CSS comes in handy, everyone's favorite thing. Okay, so we're actually going to borrow, so React Bootstrap has a container component right here. And yeah, it just means it just like makes the padding a little bit nicer. By padding, I mean like the margins on the edges. Yeah, so let's borrow that. And we're going to put it in the app.js because we want this to apply to every page. So container, React Bootstrap. And then here, instead of div, we're just going to use container. Okay. Okay, it's more padded, so that looks good. And now we just want to change the spacing between all of the elements because it's like a little packed at the top. So let's just make a separate CSS or class called like centered. And then we can just do like margin top. And we're gonna use rems, and not because rem is here, but this is just basically it's just like it's just a CSS like metric, I guess, to define like how much, or it's I guess like pixels, but basically it's defined by like how wide the letter M is in the text that it uses. It's kind of complicated, but it like the R, it's like the M just stands for like the letter M, and then the R in front of it like stands for responsive. So it just makes it look nice and like have some extra spacing. Yeah, and then we're going to actually put this class to use. Let's do it here. Class.
Oh, yeah, and one distinction is you have to use class name instead of class in JSX.
Yeah, because class is like a special JavaScript keyword, so you can't do that in here. So yeah, class name, camel case, and then centered, or not, wait, why did I name it centered? Let's name it like spaced. Okay. And let's also apply it to here. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, the top is a little bit spaced out now, and then okay, the bottom is not spaced out yet. I think you can't apply it to the actual custom components. So let's just put it in here. And then here. Okay, now it's nicely spaced out, and the table is also spaced out. Yeah, so that is CSS basics. Yeah, should I go over the dropdown now?
Oh yeah, let's go.
Yeah, so we can make this dropdown. It already looks pretty nice, but like we can just practice using React Bootstrap. So it looks like slightly nicer. So I'm gonna go back to the dropdown component. Yeah, so like don't feel like you need to memorize like component library syntax. You can just go to the documentation, just copy paste, and it's fine.
For sure. Like every 10 lines of code I write, I need to Google something for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe even less for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, okay, I can like, yeah, I guess I'll just copy and paste this over. So this will be the country select component. And I'm just gonna delete all of this. I'm sorry, Rem.
No. Your method is much better.
I'm gonna put this back. So let's just see what that looks like first. Okay. Oh, it's green. Okay, it looks exactly like how it said on the documentation. That's nice. And so we don't have to make it green. We can. That's what the variant success does, and we don't really need an ID, so we're just gonna do that. So this is the name of the button. I think it was called select a country. And then, so yeah, like Rem mentioned before, like we don't want to hard code in all the values of the dropdown. Like that's what they're doing here, but there's only 3 items, so like it's kind of trivial. But we don't want to do like 197 items, so we're going to use the map function again. So not this. We store it in countries, countries.map, and then each country maps to a drop-down item. And then the item name is just the country.country, which is like the, I guess, the proper spelling and capitalization of the country. I think that's, okay, I think that'll go away, yeah. So yeah, now we have all the countries. Okay. And then, but like when we actually click on it, it doesn't do anything anymore. So we have to fix that. So basically when you click on a drop-down item, you want it to change the country that's displayed in the table. So we want on click. And then, so we're passed in the change country function very conveniently from the props. So we can just do change. So as Rem mentioned before, we can't just call it directly here because this is known as a callback function. It doesn't execute right away. It only executes like when you click. So we want to wrap this in an arrow function. Yeah, this is an aspect of functional programming. So like, don't worry if it looks kind of syntactically confusing. This just means it wraps it in a function rather than calling the function. So yeah, and then we're going to pass in the inner function, we're going to pass in the country, which we defined here. So that means I'm going to have to change the change country function a little bit, which was defined here. So I'm not using like the E or the E.target.value anymore. So I'm just using the country. And then instead of this .set state, or I guess I still needed this .set state. And I'm just changing the selected country to the country's slug. And hopefully that should work. It doesn't work. Okay. Let's see what happened.
Wait, you want to try another country?
Cuba. Oh, never mind. It does work.
Yeah, the API is a little wonky.
Okay, sweet. Yeah.
Yay!
Yay, that's about it.
Oh my goodness.
Actually, I don't know where it is on here. This isn't even in alphabetical order. Why?
Yeah, it's not. I was just lazy to sort it. We could definitely sort it as well.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we can go over some more questions now. I know we went over everything really fast, so I'm sure you guys have more questions.
Yeah, there's some questions in Slido that I think we could answer. One of them is, can you still make the same web app using pure HTML, CSS, and JavaScript?
Yes, you can always make web apps using pure everything. I wouldn't say it's the most pleasant experience because you have to make everything from scratch, right? Like even something so simple as like this drop down, it takes a while to code that in like pure JavaScript, pure HTML, CSS. Yeah, but I mean, I guess it's a good exercise to be able to do that without using any sort of framework, because that's like the basis of web programming. But yeah, like the syntax will look a lot different if you try it like that.
If you're doing like a hackathon project, it would be a lot easier to use a framework. And in fact, if you're writing like code for a company or something, they definitely prefer you to write it in a framework. Who writes like pure HTML, CSS, JavaScript?
Yep.
I'm not sure. It's very tough.
Yeah, you see like how much code is already needed to just make this simple stuff, and like, yeah, and you would need like element selectors and yeah, stuff like that.
We also have what are some other alternatives to React, and are there any downsides to using React?
Yeah, so there's a lot of alternatives. I can actually just look it up here. So like one of them is called like Angular, and this is
Oh my goodness, Angular. Oh,
Angular is a Google's open source web dev framework. I've never used it. I heard it's not as good as React, but it's like kind of similar. I don't know. Do you have something to say about it, Rem?
Angular is straight up painful. The sale website we had was in Angular and it was impossible.
Okay, well, yeah, you can use that if you want, but I'm hearing it's not the greatest. There's
Sorry,
also
I'm very biased. But yeah, a lot of people use Angular.
there's also Vue.js. I haven't used this either, but I think this is like a popular alternative to React. I mean, they're all based on like the same premise of like reusable components, I'm pretty sure. I guess downsides of React. Honestly, I love React. Like, I think maybe the most major downside is like the setup. But that's made pretty easy by like the Create React app bootstrap. And I guess it is harder to like if you really want to get into like the nitty gritty stuff. Like I recently learned this JavaScript visualization tool called D3JS, and I tried using that with React, and it's like really hard to use together because both of them try to control like the elements on the page. That's like kind of complicated, but like there's some things it doesn't work well with because it abstracts a lot of the nitty gritty stuff away.
Another question is, when do you use a functional versus class component?
Yeah, there's not really a clear answer to that. Like I said before, I guess it comes down to preference.
I guess
Yeah.
if you're storing a lot of variables in the state, it will make more sense to use a class component. So if you're working with, a lot of variables in the state, it'll make sense to, have it somewhere. And it's more kind of object oriented in that sense. Does that make sense? And if you use functional components, then it's more like
Functional.
it's more functional.
Yeah. I guess like how I like to think about it is that like JavaScript is, I guess it is like it supports functional programming. So I think if you use functional components, you are taking better advantage of that property that it has. Although it does support like classes too, I think it's really, really nice to be able to use functional components and not have to worry about like so many different component did mount. Or I guess there's also React hooks, but yeah, I guess you don't have to worry about managing state because it's kind of done for you with like the React hooks. Yeah, I mean, I prefer functional components, and I haven't found any use case where like class is like objectively better than functional. So Yeah.
So our last question is, if you're a beginner, how do you start with React?
I think a good place to start is the documentation. It's really nice. Like if you looked at it has like some tutorials. Yeah, like try React, learn React. Yeah, we use create a new React app. This like automatically creates like a templated React app for you. Yeah, here's like the tutorial. Yeah, it has like some pretty basic components that you can try. Here they use class components. Yeah, I think that I started with the documentation, but I don't know. What about you, Rem?
I started with Stack Overflow.
Another good one.
Yeah, very good. Oh, YouTube tutorials are very nice. Yeah, I learned most things through YouTube tutorials. If you just search like, and especially for your hackathon idea, if you have, you know, a more general idea of your idea, a lot of times people would have already coded that. So for example, if say you're making an app like, you want to, I don't know, draw like COVID data with graphs, you can search like how to draw graphs with like React and JavaScript. And people will obviously not be graphing like COVID data, but the techniques would be the same. And you just have to use your own data.
Any other questions?
I think that's it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you guys for obviously like staying so long. We hope you enjoyed this workshop. It was our first workshop for HackThis actually, and we're glad that we got to have such a great turnout. So really quickly, I guess, first of all, HackThis is currently also hosting one of its icebreaker sessions right now, networking, getting to know teammates. So if you're interested in that, we strongly recommend that you go over to Discord and join that icebreaker link. Also, right now, we are posting something in the chat, which is basically the link to a form that you can fill out to enter yourself in a giveaway. We give these to people who kind of stay all the way towards the end of an event. And basically, if you fill this out and you put in that password, you are going to get selected to kind of be a part of a giveaway. So that's fun, and good luck with that.
Yeah. Huge shout out to Alice and Rem for hosting this workshop. It was super awesome. We will be publishing the slides and code for people to refer to later. And also be sure to join us for the second part of Web Dev Workshop series on Sunday. We'll be talking more about databases, backend, and GraphQL.
Yeah, and as Shrestha mentioned, all of these details are going to go in the workshops and events channel on the Discord. So keep an eye out on that and just stay active on the Discord in general. There's going to be a lot of stuff on there for you guys. Awesome. I think that about concludes it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Do I leave?